Welcome to the Empowered Mothers Network podcast, supporting mothers to be the best version of themselves. I'm Sarah and this is episode 22, and this episode is called Awakening the Divine Feminine, a Guide for Mothers. So this is something I love talking about on a personal level. I think if you are familiar with Empowered Mothers Network and you had a bit of a look about, maybe you've joined the network and subscribed, you'll know that the kind of ethos of Empowered Mothers Network is that we empower women, mothers particularly, to be the best version of themselves, essentially. So we talk about, things like health, well-being, spirituality. And in terms of spirituality, I know it can be like quite a spectrum. It depends also where you're at on your spiritual journey. Some people will be at a place where they are interested in spirituality and they're just sort of bringing it into their lives as it's become more and more, I guess, mainstream, more and more socially talked about. So some people are kind of at the beginning of exploring what it means to be a spiritual person, perhaps now without the dogma of a religious background. And then some people are further down the line, further along on the journey. You might have had a spiritual, there goes my light. You might have had a spiritual awakening experience, or basically there's like a kind of a spectrum, and I think some aspects of spirituality that I maybe already have or haven't talked about yet might be too like woo-woo for some people. I know when I first had my spiritual awakening, the first one back in 2009, 2010, there were kind of topics then that I sort of read about and thought, this is like, this is too far out there for me, this is too woo-woo, I'm not totally knowing what's going on here. And then more recently, as I guess my kind of journey has progressed, those topics that back 15 years ago seemed too much out there for me, I'm starting to get a bit more of an understanding beyond the intellectual of it. I think for a lot of us, we can sort of read all these books, spiritual and self-help books that come out, but we can have the information up in our brains, but until we really embody it and live it, then it becomes more like wisdom-based, and we get a deeper understanding of it. So yeah, from that, what I was trying to say, I guess, is that we're all at different parts of the spiritual journey. So when I start to talk about, like awakening the divine feminine energies, that might be for some people a little bit too much like, that seems a bit like woo-woo, too out there for me. At the same time, a lot of people will be interested in it. So what I would say is, if you are either interested in spirituality or on your own awakening journey, one of which you probably are if you're listening or watching to this podcast, is that this, even just a simple act of connecting with this energy, can be really powerful in kind of propelling you along that journey. So if you come at it with like an open mind and an open heart, as we might discuss in a bit, you can find that, maybe if you're sort of more towards the beginning of your journey and you're interested in this sort of thing, but you're not quite sure what to do with it or where to go, that it can actually open up new levels of awareness for you, and then that can lead to ultimately where you're going. So when I'm talking about divine feminine energy today, again, because my target group of people to speak to through Empowered Mothers Network is mothers, so I'm primarily talking to females, but not necessarily. So we can always connect with the divine feminine energy regardless of gender. It's within everybody. Every single person has this blend of what you call like divine masculine energy and divine feminine energy. And yeah, right now we are in the world, they are like sort of whack, aren't they? So there are the two energies, the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang, the polarities, the balance each other. But today I'm just focusing on the divine feminine because as a group of people, as mothers, I feel like this is a particular area where we can really benefit from reconnecting with that energy. Not just as a woman or a female or identifying as a female, but as an actual mother of children or caregiver of children. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about understanding the divine feminine and the energy and what it is. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about the role of the divine feminine motherhood, some ways we can reconnect with the feminine, and how it links into our spiritual growth, and also supporting each other in feminine energy as well, rather than the great divides. So that's kind of an overview of what I'm discussing in this episode. Okay, so firstly, the understanding the divine feminine energy is one of them things, again, where we can have a kind of notion of it and an idea of what it means through our own personal awareness of it. But yeah, it's in terms of understanding it, maybe that's the wrong word, because I think energies like this are something you can never truly understand. But we're humans and we have the brain and we want to, kind of logicalize and compartmentalize and understand everything. So as much as we can, the energy is something that, as mothers as well, we've already experienced this. So the nurturing energy, creative, intuitive and powerful. I'm not going to go majorly deep into what the divine feminine energy is, because there's loads of books out there that do that really well. But those words are just like an overview of feminine energy. There's also the side to the feminine energy that is more... can be more destructive in ways. So if you've read about the cycles of life, death, rebirth, that kind of thing, there's that side to the feminine energy as well. And I think this side is coming up for a lot of people now because the feminine energy has been sort of squashed and repressed for so long and almost denied in places, that now it is bubbling back up, and you're getting the kind of side of it where we're exploding in anger sometimes, or we've got anger that's bubbling beneath the surface. Again, every person deals with these things kind of differently. Some people are will put on the mask for going out into the world and will really suppress those what they perceive as negative emotions, and some people it'll just come out like a volcano every so often, and some people are just really pissed off and angry because of this suppression. So there's the two sides to the feminine energy. There's the kind of side you want to think about, the nice fluffy cozy slippers nurturing side, and then there's the side that's like extremely pissed off. There's the side that's destruction. It's not necessarily pissed off, but destruction, but at the same time, the great strength lies in that. So there's not one size fits all way of really connecting with this feminine energy as it comes up within you, because we're all at different places on our path. It kind of can manifest so differently. But those words are kind of there to give an overall description to this kind of energy. And I think the more you connect with it, the more you can kind of feel it in your body, feel it and sense it, rather than intellectualize it and put it into words and put it in a container. So the next thing I was going to say is that the feminine energy does contrast with the masculine energy, which is why we have such a hard time of conceptualizing the feminine energy, I think, because the masculine energy is all about your action, your logic, your structure. So that's easier to compartmentalize: productivity, output, what we're doing into the world. The masculine energy, which I'll talk about in a minute. So why is connecting, or why do I think connecting with the divine feminine is so important for mothers, especially now? Obviously motherhood naturally, as I just mentioned before, I think briefly, aligns quite well with some aspects of the divine feminine. So the nurturing side, the creative side, a lot of the feminine energy is about creation. So the whole act of making a baby is like one of the biggest acts of creation itself. The emotional intelligence as well. So these are all aspects we really need and we really rely upon in motherhood, especially early motherhood, you know, with, say, emotional intelligence. When you first had a baby, you learn to kind of, you know, what your baby is needing, by its cries, by body language, by just that mother-baby connection. You start tuning intuitively into what it is your baby needs. And to me, those aspects of like nurturing and like emotional intelligence, they work quite well in a balance with that masculine energy of creating a container, because as a mother you can then sort of create this safe space with that nurturing energy, but in a container space to provide for your children to grow up in, and that gives them, you know, the best possible start in life, I guess. We all aspire for that, but naturally, of course, there are you know, unlimited amount of things that can happen in lives, and inevitably at some point your children are going to come up against the world or come up against something that affects them in a negative way. But trying to draw out that like nurturing and protective part of ourselves is really great sort of base to give to our children to grow up in. And this links as well into when you've given birth, the hormone oxytocin that is released, which we have sort of around a particularly high point around when you've had a baby and you're bonding with the baby and you're in that kind of nurturing energy, and that hormone is then released and that helps you bond with your baby. So that's like a positive feedback loop there for oxytocin production that encourages more of your sort of nurturing motherly behaviour towards your child, and that also, you know, as it's released in your body, is like a feel-good chemical for you. So that's really encapsulating that nurturing part of feminine energy, and it's a really good positive feedback loop for mother and baby too. And that's great and that's lovely, and many times we have that when we have kids, but many times we don't as well now. So many mums have gone through either traumatic births or difficulties with connecting with babies, just for an example. And to me, there's this societal pressure at the moment where, you know, we've got the ideal of this mothering energy that's so apparently revered, but at the same time we're being totally disconnected from that. And we're pushed into an over-reliance on like masculine energy in society. So that comes out mainly as like doing, achieving. So if you think of like a typical woman's life over her 20s, 30s, 40s, you tend to now come out of school, get into a career, you know, you're encouraged to like climb the career ladder, pursue that side of things, do things, achieve things, all this really masculine energy, you know, kind of proving yourself in a way, but really focusing on productivity. And then, you know, many of us come to a point where we want to have kids. So then you come out of your sort of career phase and into your mother phase, and suddenly you're thrown into having kids, and the energy needed for that is just totally different. You can't do and achieve and productivity your day like you could before in your career, where you were so praised for it by society, really. Now suddenly the tables have turned and you have this little person who requires a different sort of approach than you're used to giving, and that's when really the discrepancy, the imbalance between masculine and feminine energies that we have in our modern society now can really come up. I don't think this is just when we've just had a baby as well. It sort of carries on as our kids are getting older. You know, a lot of mums will go back to work at various points baby toddler stage, maybe older. At some point, mums end up trying to sort of go back to work. Some go back into careers, some don't. But there's still that kind of imbalance between the masculine and the feminine energy. And you could be working like a 9-to-5 job and trying to be a mother and run the house. There's so many different things going on, and there's so many different situations we find ourselves in as mothers. We don't all have the 9-to-5 job now, but we have different numbers of kids, but the underlying issue is still the same. We are burning out. We are getting to a point where we can't do everything that either we're expecting ourselves to do or we feel that others in society are expecting us to do. There is so much kind of burnout or almost burnout. I think I've spoke about this in the podcast episode about spinning plates. Yeah, I think I spoke about it in there. But there's just this over reliance on masculine energy, and it's really leaning us now towards burnout. So you might be able to think of something in your own life where, during motherhood you felt really disconnected from feminine energy in some way. The biggest one I can think of for my own life was I had my girls quite close together. They were like 14 months apart. And at the time I was also trying to set up like a web design business just before I got pregnant with my eldest. And I kind of continued on with that a little bit while she was a baby and while I was pregnant with her younger sister. And then by the time her younger sister came, and I had two of them under 2 years old, and I was trying still to try to have a web design business from home. And also I was trying at the time, shortly after my second was born, to launch Empowered Mothers Network, which was a bit more tailored towards just postpartum care then. And it was just, I was just burning out. I wasn't connected with that nurturing element of feminine energy. And I was still stuck in that mode of like trying to be productive because, if some days I was just looking after the kids and maybe getting food on the table and maybe doing like 5 or 10 minutes of cleaning the house. And it's just, there's nothing to show for it at the end of the day that you can say, oh, well, look, I've done this, I've produced this, I've achieved this today. And coming from such a strong mindset of that, and for whatever reason, it was really, really difficult for me to kind of connect with the feminine and mothering energy that I have within me. So I've got a little section here about ways to connect with the divine feminine energy. I'm going to just go through what they are first, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about expectations. So some practices to connect with feminine energy on a daily basis are definitely grounding. So I've started this fairly recently actually, and it is really, really helping me to connect with that feminine energy. And I might say at this point, you might not call it divine feminine energy. You might then call it, just look at it more from like an earth perspective. So like earth's energy, feminine energy, divine feminine energy, she. There's loads of different names, but I think you probably get what I'm referring to easiest if I talk about it as like either feminine energy, the feminine, divine feminine. So grounding, getting outside, if you can take shoes, socks off, go and stand on some earth. Again, we're getting to autumn here, so it's getting a little bit more challenging because the earth's getting colder and wetter. But you can still do it, even just for like 5 or 10 minutes. Getting out and grounding, not just standing in nature, although that is good, but literally having bare feet on the earth. And then the kind of ions, I think is they'll come up from the earth. We're going to science now. The ions that come up from the earth and then can get into your body on a sort of scientific more level, but also you're connecting really physically, literally, with the earth energy there, which is the embodiment of feminine energy. Meditation, because meditation is good for like pretty much everything, but connecting with feminine energy, as someone who works with crystals, then definitely you can connect with feminine energy through certain crystals. Lots of people have rose quartz, that's a really good one. I've also got some, if you got the EMN journal, the last journal, then I recommended in there my book for the month, which I think was it Crystals and Stones of the New Consciousness? There's definitely these crystals of that. I think it might be Crystals and Stones of the New Consciousness. And they talk about a type of stone that they discovered, the author kind of discovered, which is a new mix of stone that was found in the US, and it's called Rose Sophia, which is named after Sophia, the feminine element, the feminine name of Earth. And that is a really good stone to open up the heart chakra and connect with feminine energy. So I have got actually some of that stone on order, and I'm going to start working with it. So I will let you know in the journal, maybe, or in another video, how that's working out. But yeah, stones are really good to just sit with and meditate and connect with that feminine energy. Again, if you're not at the point where you're into kind of what you might term as woo-woo stuff, like crystals and cards and whatnot, then the simplest form of connecting with it is like creative expression, because that's like so feminine energy, creating. So, you know, whatever it is that you do to create, whatever you feel like in the pit of your stomach, in your womb, what you want to create, then get out and create that. And as well as connecting with divine feminine energy, we need to remember it's actually already within us. So one of the most powerful and disruptive to society things we can do is actually come back to our own bodies and our own emotions, and really, you know, we've all got intuition. We need to learn to connect with it. The more we trust ourselves and our bodies, particularly, the more then that it's, again, like the positive feedback loop I was talking about with oxytocin. The more then, you know, intuitive things will come through, and then the more we'll end up trusting those intuitive insights, and then that really develops that muscle, if you will. So really honouring your body as well. And this can be one of the hardest things is, you know, again, there's this part of society that's like, oh, self-care, you know, go and look after yourself, go and look after your body. But it's telling us, how is it telling us to look after our body? Is it telling us, you know, oh, we deserve this really expensive face cream to slap on so that we don't look as old? Or are we doing something a bit more radical in terms of self-care? So that might look more like, as women, we are cyclica, okay? Cyclica. And sometimes we do need to rest. That will come for a big slap in the face for some people through, if they're not listening, through eventually things like physical illness. Personally, I've had it every so often, and had it pretty recently as well, as in very recently, as in the last few days, as in like you just cannot get off the sofa. You just feel weak, exhausted. Obviously, sometimes there's underlying medical conditions, so definitely always go and get that checked out. But sometimes we just get absolutely knocked for six, and it might just be the physical manifestation of actual burnout, or, you know, just you get it where it's like life is clearly telling you need to slow down, or you need to rest, and then sometimes we just don't listen and we plow on and we keep going in masculine productive action mode and burn out. And sometimes we hear it and say, okay, yeah, I'm listening, but we want to control that as well, and we want to do it on our own terms still, because we want that element of control. So we'll say, okay, we'll have a little bit of we'll take it a little bit slower. I'll go at a little bit of a slower pace than I usually do, or whatnot, or I'll have an hour where I just have a rest or something like that. And then, that's not enough. Maybe we've got so far down the line that at that point that's just like a drop in the ocean. So it's really being able to surrender to rest. And I think, you'll know when you need to come out the other side and go back to being out there and doing again, because you'll get that. You get that. I know I got it when I was like when I had a young baby. It was just that feeling of wanting to get back out there, wanting to do stuff again. I'm full of ideas, and I feel like I'm full of creative energy, and I want to get creating again, something like that. Also really working on emotional maturity, which is an ongoing process, but really, letting emotions come up, whatever the hell they are, whether we perceive them as good or bad, just not suppressing them, letting them come up and sit with them and letting them play out, and really trying to remember and keep in the back of our mind that our emotions are a good indicator and way shower, but they are not us. So that's again an ongoing process. But what I will say for connecting with the feminine energy is, for me, because I'm into crystals and Reiki, I really used a lot of that, and herbal medicine as well, to really focus on opening up my heart chakra, because I am somebody who's always been very sort of productive and action orientated, and feels like if I'm not producing tangible results, I'm not of enough value, if you know what I mean. So working on opening the heart for me personally, and maybe the throat as well, was really important to really drop into that heart centre and into that energy and start reconnecting. And you might have other things like rituals as well, where you connect with feminine energy, something as simple as drawing an oracle card and lighting a candle. Or you might set up a little altar. For some people, really connecting with spiritual figures that represent the divine feminine can be a really useful catalyst in like a spiritual journey. So depending on what your preference is, you might connect with like goddesses like Isis, or the Egyptian goddess, not the other Isis. Or you could have like Mother Mary, if you kind of maybe, again, you don't have to perceive them as like if you're not into a particular religion, you might not have to perceive that person as being all to do with that religion, if that's something you've kind of backed away from. I think Lisa Lisser's got a new book out now called Venus, and that's really good read if you are wanting to connect with feminine energy. Then definitely tapping into that Venusian energy is really, really beneficial. Okay, so what I was going to say as well, when I talked about all those ways to connect with the divine feminine, I was also going to say that don't have too much expectation on how that is going to show up for you. Again, I've talked at the beginning of this podcast about the different kind of facets of feminine energy. For some people, it might, show up as feeling more nurturing and, connecting. It can different facets at different times. So sometimes you might feel like really suddenly more connected to other people. In my case, more sociable. I realised I wasn't actually kind of, antisocial as it was. It was just, kind of layers to peel off of the self. So it can show up as that kind of nurturing, collaborative side. The other side of some people call it like the dark feminine, don't they? The dark side of the energy. I don't know if it's dark or not. Again, we've got certain connotations with certain words, but just be aware that it can come up in different ways. So it can come up as, you might have a massive waves of anger coming from somewhere, so all of a sudden you might have a sudden urge to speak out. So if you're somebody who's always been quite quiet and introverted and not really sort of said what they thought and not wanted to rock the boat, you might have a sudden urge to really sort of express how you think and how you feel now. And sorry everyone if I'm going to offend you, but it's got to come out and it's got to be said. There are different ways that the feminine can come out and express itself through you, particularly as we move towards standing in our own power. So having said that, having mentioned that, sometimes when what you might perceive as the darker side of feminine energy comes through you, it can be very overwhelming. It can be scary if you don't know what's happening. It can be strong as hell. And that can be really when you do sort of more seek out the nurturing collaborative side, because you need somebody else to help you work out what the heck is going on. And this is essentially one of the things I'm trying to do with Empowered Mothers Network, so that people become aware that they're not alone in this. They're not alone in this this kind of stepping into their own power. But this, as we all do that, we're all stepping into our own powers individually, but also as a collective at the same time. So there's this power in community of embodying feminine energy, and we can kind of support each other in embracing this energy through sharing, collaboration, also women's groups as well, which is something I'm pondering setting up. I don't know if I'm going to set one up around here or not. I'm not sure in my locality if it's needed or not, so I'm just dancing around with that at the moment, and we'll see. But there are more and more women's circles spreading around now, and really, sort of coming together and collaborating, whether it's on a kind of work mission level, or whether it's on a parenting level, or just that emotional spiritual support level. But really, remembering now that we aren't all individualized, disconnected from each other. If you're into podcasts about the science, then my goodness, it's all you can sit there for hours about how the science of how we are all interconnected. Okay, so I've waffled on for quite a long time there. Hopefully I've talked a bit about what the divine feminine energy is, how it might show up for you, how it enhances motherhood as well, and some strategies for reconnecting with the energy, learning how to invite it into your life a bit more and balance it with the masculine energy, because most of us have the masculine energy set up. Some of us, maybe if you find that you're very much a people pleaser and you're very much like an empath, and you're giving a lot of yourself, it might be that you get more of, if you start connecting with the feminine energy again, it might be now more in that case that you need to invite some of what people perceive as the darker energy to come into your life, more of the setting boundaries, more of the saying no, and balancing that with the masculine in that way. So keep it small, keep it simple. Try and find a few things in, even in day-to-day life where you could connect a bit more. Something that's really useful as well is dance and movement. So, even if you're putting on some music that you enjoy, again, connecting with that Venusian energy. So doing something for yourself that feels good. So that might be going and having a massage, or dancing in a way that feels good, or just having lots of sex, that's the best one. Or buying an outfit that makes you feel good, rather than a certain way to look a certain way for external people, but something that makes you feel good within yourself and that kind of nurtures your energy. So I would love to hear your experiences and thoughts about connecting with your own feminine energy, whether you have tips that wherever you have tips where you have connected with your energy in a certain way that might be good for other mums, or whether have you connected and sort of experienced the more, shall we say, powerful, feisty side of the feminine energy. If you have any comments about that, then please let me know in the comments below on YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube. And I would love to hear your experiences. Otherwise, I will leave it here for this podcast episode because it's gone on for quite a while. And if you want to join the network, getting this feminine energy through motherhood together through collaboration, you can join the network, or either subscribe to the podcast on YouTube for a start, or you can get the fortnightly journal that I send out via email, which is surprisingly every fortnight. And you can get that by subscribing. You go on the website, or there's a link, I think, in the Instagram bio where you can subscribe to that, get that every fortnight. But please join us as we're slowly growing, and I really want to make this a community where we really can step into our own power and step into our own energies, but as a collective. And that will really, really help and kind of filter down into the generations that we're birthing as well and nurturing. So hopefully I will see you next podcast episode. Otherwise, subscribe, or we'll take care and see you soon.